But let me turn to the topic which I am supposed to speak about. And it's actually going to be a reflection on what we heard this morning, both from Brian Griffiths and from Maria Chiara Carrozza. And also Professor Zimmermann yesterday hinted at the challenge posed by technology. And so I gave the title Business and Work, the Future of Work and the Dignity of the Worker. And I would like to start with a quotation from Josef Schumpeter, who's one of my favorite economists. He said that business in a free market economy is exposed to a perennial gale of creative destruction. That is a very famous quotation by him. And he explains, this gale of destruction is not only a circumstance in which businesses kind of have to exist, but it's actually of the essence of a free market economy that constantly has to innovate, has to change, has to live up to new challenges. And he actually says that is no problem because technological possibilities are an uncharted sea. So he was an optimist, and I have kind of collected the literature that has been published over the last years on technology and work. And there are two big positions in this literature. And it's always easy to describe positions by going to the extremes. One we could call the optimistic stance is, well, it's always been like this. We've always had innovation. We've always had the gale of destruction, and it has always ended up expanding the economy and creating new employment. So technology is something great, and we shouldn't be afraid of it, even though initially it is disruptive. On the long run, it creates work. The pessimistic stance would be the opposite. They say, well, it has been like this in the past, but the fourth industrial revolution is an unprecedented phenomenon, comparable only to the shift from script to print. It was that was a complete cultural change, and artificial intelligence, effective computing, big data, the exponential growth of storage capacity, processing speed, capabilities of machines and so on, will this time finally plunge us into what John Maynard Keynes in 1931 called technological unemployment. And this time it's really going to put people out of work in a massive way, and that will really accentuate the precedence of capital over labor. Those who have capital, they will be able to invest in machines, they will be able to develop machines, who will create more wealth and more prosperity, and those who have only their labor to offer, they will be pushed out and they will be deprived of what Pope Francis has called the dignity of the worker, which is the dignity of earning their own bread through their own work. And therefore, this pessimist position demands something like a universal income that redistributes the material gains among those who have been excluded from the possibility of earning their own bread. Now, these are the two extreme positions. The vast majority of authors hold moderate positions where they say, yes, there will be, in the medium run, machines will be instrumental, but then in the long run, they will probably replace a lot of labor. But most people, nearly all the people I've read, they say leaders must react immediately. There should be a moral debate, there should be a political debate, and the technological experts are kindly asked to translate their highly technological language into language which we lay people in a technological sense can understand. We are the stakeholders, and we should be included in the debate about our own future. We heard about the digital cloud, but there's also the concept of the human cloud, which means that, and I quote from Klaus Schwab's book, "The virtual cloud of aspiring workers located anywhere in the world, where providers of labor are no longer employees in the traditional sense, but rather independent workers who perform specific tasks." So it might be that the workforce in future will be people who are Uber drivers a part of the day, then they are Instacart shoppers, and then they are Airbnb hosts, and in the rest of the time they're task rabbits. So we'll have kind of portfolios of different activities, and we'll be hired over this human cloud. The positive side of this, in the ideal case, is that we will have a lot of freedom, less stress, and greater job satisfaction. But it could also result in a downward spiraling of social protection. Employers are very happy with this because these people are actually self-employing, so they're not protected by the laws that protect workers. So in what follows, I would like to make some comments which I would like to be understood as question marks to this general narrative between optimists and pessimists. And then I would like to give two stories that show the positive and the negative sides, and I want to conclude with some reflections. So the three question marks I put to the traditional narrative are the following three. We should question futurology in the sense that even the pessimists, in their projection of linear or even exponential technological growth, are optimists in the sense that they think that our development will go on as it is now. So if we can question this by saying, well, have you taken into account, for instance, that our future depends more on bees and butterflies than on technology? And I'm not joking. In 2016, in Nature, an article was published by a series of scientists who have pointed out that 90% of tropical flowering plant species and about 78% of temperate zone species rely, at least in part, on animal pollination. So if the bees and the other insects who are endangered by our technology, by herbicides, by insecticides, by the use of machines, if they die out, then we probably we'll have a food shortage, and we'll have to reallocate our resources into the production of food instead of artificial intelligence. The second caveat, which I would add to this story, is that unfortunately our wounded human nature must count with the terrible possibility of a war, which would be very disruptive. And it would burn our resources in unproductive and in an illiberal way. I don't want to go into politics, but if you read some of the things some of our contemporary world leaders say, that makes us fear the worst. Also, we have to consider massive migration. In Italy and the southern countries, one speaks of the barbaric invasions at the end of the Roman Empire. We in Austria and the North, we call it the migration of the peoples in a more friendly way. But so in any case, this migration of the peoples was disruptive for the Roman Empire because the Roman Empire was not able to integrate these people into their culture. So if we don't manage to integrate migrants, we will also be in trouble. And the third comment harks back to Schumpeter's insight. He says, nobody will destroy capitalism or the free market economy from the outside the danger for the market economy and for capitalism is its own success. And he says, the success of capitalism brings the growth of big corporations that oust the small and the medium entrepreneur. So he says, this is the backbone of our free society and of a free economy. And if this goes on, and we can see this with the five big companies, this will be a big problem for our market economy. Now, so having considered these question marks, I asked myself, well, should I then reject the general narrative? And I said no. No, because actually, even if we have the case, okay, barred a natural catastrophe like the crash of a comet or something, even in the case that the bees die out, then we might invent a technology that does the pollination for the bees, you know, or unfortunately war has always been a great propulsion in technological innovation, you know, so, well, it's, the only thing which really would cause us to implode is a moral collapse of a society, I think. Now, I would like to illustrate what I will, the two sides of development, of technological development, with two stories. One is the story of a Bangladesh finance person called Iqbal Qadir, who was, in 1993, he was working in a small finance investment company in New York City. And one afternoon, the computer network in his company collapsed. And he was sitting there and he was completely unable to work. And while he was waiting for someone to fix the network, he realized that connectivity is productivity. And he thought of all the people in his home country, Bangladesh, who wanted to work but who were unable to work because they were excluded from connectivity. So what he did was he quit his lucrative job in New York, he went back to Bangladesh, and he approached the Grameen Bank. The Grameen Bank was founded by Mohammed Yunus, and their scheme was to give microcredits, as most of you know, and they give them to small groups of women. They have to be female. That doesn't say a lot of good about us males, but anyhow. So what the women do is they buy a cow or a sewing machine or a stove, and with the milk they're sewing or they're baking, they not only pay back the loan, but they can make a nice profit and develop their family. So he went to Grameen Bank and he said, look, a cell phone can be a cow. And they said, what do you mean? Well, you see, in Bangladesh, there are 120 million inhabitants, but there are exactly 100,000 telephone lines. So if we give loans to buy a smartphone or a cell phone, the women who buy this can rent it out to people, and it's as if it were a cow. So they said, yeah, okay. So he spent 4 years raising the initial $120 million that were necessary and trying to get telecom companies on board. And one of the companies that did that was Telenor of Norway. So they started out, and very soon there were 300,000 people with a phone on that plan. Now there are 55 million subscribers. And the initial 120 million have become $3.5 billion. And Telenor, who is the national telephone company of a state with exactly 5 million inhabitants, now has 220 million clients in Asia. So connectivity really is productivity. Now there are 110 million smartphones in Bangladesh on a population of 160 million people. This has completely changed the economy of the country. The smartphone has enabled telebanking, it has enabled pay through systems like Impresa, and so on. Now the second story has to do with the downsides of technology, and again with the smartphone. It's actually two stories in one, actually three stories in one, told independently, one from the other, by two pediatric psychiatrists. You might have heard of it, it's gone viral. Jean Twenge has been studying adolescent behavior since 2007. And this year she published her results of her studies over 10 years, and she said at the beginning she thought it was coincidence, but it's been consolidated over these 10 years that adolescent teen behavior has changed. Teens stay at home longer, they date less, teenage pregnancy has gone down, abortion has gone down, they drink less, they don't want to take the driver's license till they're over 20, and so on. She said she couldn't believe it, but it's consolidated. So in a certain sense, they're safer. But on the other hand, she noticed a big increase in mental distress. There's a big mental health problem. Anxiety is up. Suicide is the cause of death #1 among adolescents. And she says it is statistically correlated with the smartphone. It gives the illusion of relationship, but it doesn't give real relationship. She says there's not a single exception. All screen activities are linked to less happiness, and all non-screen activities are linked to more happiness. Nicholas Carr last week published an article in the Wall Street Journal where he said where he presented a series of studies in which smartphones, connectivity reduces productivity. So on the one hand, we have connectivity creates productivity. On the other hand, we have connectivity reduces productivity. The freedom to work anywhere has become the obligation to work everywhere. Right, so we have these two sides to it, and I reflected on this, and I reflected on what the future of work might be. Where are we going? What does this, the downside of technology in our Western societies, what could that make us conclude? So I agree with the experts that the future of human work will gravitate either to compete with the machines or to build the machines. And where we can compete with the machines is not in knowledge, storage, fast, quick, the speed in which we calculate, but in human traits and capabilities such as empathy and compassion. I quote from the main book on this, Susskind and Susskind. In the future, there will be a need for wise and empathetic, discipline-independent individuals, empathizers, who can provide the reassurance to recipients of their work that is often as important as the correct answer, the reassurance. We might be operated by computers, by machines, surgeons, technical surgeons that don't make any mistake, but we will be very happy that somebody will be there to explain it to us and to hold our hand when we wake up. Now, my clue for the future is that human relationships will become increasingly important, and with them, with this importance of human relationships, will emerge new forms of work that will admit of different forms of social reward, not only monetary wages. Now, over the last years, there have been many articles in the Harvard Business Review on work, all kinds of analysis. But they never question the basic notion that work is wage-earning activity. Now, I too wish to earn money. But the notion that all work is remunerated is not at all obvious, nor is it necessary. It ignores the fact that throughout most of human history, and also to some extent still today, there are serious professional activities that are embedded in society outside of monetary exchanges. In feudal times, the work of hunters, farmers, warriors was honored by marks of social distinction and access to common goods whose use was regulated in a way that they weren't depleted. So, and the feudal lord used his money or his wealth, his power, to maintain his people whom he knew and whom in the best case he loved. Work for wages, in contrast, is a consequence of the social changes brought about by the commercial society that is the matrix of the Enlightenment. In the commercial society, strangers exchange goods and services in mutual self-interest and in harmony, but not because they are personally interested in the well-being of their neighbor or love him. The rise of the commercial society replaced personal relationships with what has been called the cash nexus. This type of work gives greater freedom, but it reduces the personal relationships among the members of society. We are not friends and relatives anymore, members of families and clans, like in medieval times, but we're friendly strangers who deal with each other in cash. Now, because of this reductivism, a whole category of work does not even appear on the radar screen of the modern definition of work. Work like homemaking, like domestic work, like caregiving, the work of getting well during an illness, or the work of looking for work, or voluntary community service, and others. All these types of work that will be the future of human work, because in them we can compete with machines. Now, I in no way want to return to feudal times, in no way. But what I want to is to reflect on how human relational work can be embedded in society and rewarded in a way that not only guarantees survival or attribution of material goods by central authority, which we don't want, but grants individual freedom, dignity, and joy in an economic system that is increasingly not operating with cash. Perhaps most of what we call work today will be done by machines, and at least in the rich countries. In consequence, there will be an enormous need for relational work, and a lot of human work will be of this character. Probably the human work of the future will increasingly be remunerated by digital access to virtual accounts that in some form of digital currency expresses social recognition. When traditional goods and services are produced by machines with artificial intelligence, and by the sheer scale of the economy, the prices are down to a minimum, things that have no price now, like sunshine and air, will have a price tag. And so will human caregiving and empathy. However, we should not, I propose, think in the categories of wages and work contracts, but of new social institutions, like accreditation organizations, that emit a new form of relational currency with which the work of the future will be given social recognition. Recognition is the basic expression of dignity. No doubt, a form of dignity that stresses that our personhood is not only built on individuality, but also on relationality. Thank you very much.